So good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. It's Joe and Mike's award-winning virtual tours here in Edinburgh. It's a big hello to everybody, and just to give you an update, I've had the brace removed from my leg, so I'll be doing the can-can before the end of the week, or at least maybe doing a Highland fling at New Year, I don't know, but I am doing physiotherapy. Things are improving greatly, so thank you for your concern and for your comments. It's really appreciate it. And I'm going to say a thank you again. We've got a big thank you from Teresa Grant. She sent us a great message. She's over there in Quigley's Point in Ireland. She says, "Thanks guys, it's been great to follow your tours. Yeah, so dedicated to bring us the best." Well, we are indeed, and we love what we do, and we're glad you're still enjoying it. And also got a retrospective thank you to Frances Monaghan. Frances says that she's still enjoying the walks, especially the one to Swanston Village. Yeah, Swanston's a lovely little place, and we like to try and take people off the beaten track, and Swanston Village is one of those places. Very historic little place. If you haven't seen the one in Swanston Village, you can catch it up on YouTube. And Mike, we got some really good news, didn't we, about YouTube?
Yeah, folks, and hello from me as well. We've had over 1,000. We've got, see if I can come in and we can still see each other. We've got over 1,000 views, so thank you very much. Well, not views, but subscribers. Yeah, sorry. And we're even creeping above that. So the more you can subscribe, if you haven't already done so, and encourage your friends also, that would be fantastic. So we're looking now at 2,000 views.
But we're starting off our tour exactly where Mike finished off last week. Because I want to make a couple of links. Now, Mike was talking about the servant here, Malvina Wells, who was buried here next to the family that she worked with. She lived till a grand old age. She lived to her 80s, did Malvina? So she was well known in Edinburgh.
She was...
coming from a slave background, brought over back to Scotland, and that must have been a shock for her as well, being brought over from the Caribbean to here as well. Became a free woman, and is buried next to the family that she worked with, and the family certainly did look after her, so it was a great philanthropy. I mean, I know it's a sad story, but Malvina was from a slave background, but she was buried with the great and the good here. And it's while I was on the broadcast with you last week when I was getting my physiotherapy, and one of the other great and the good who's buried here, and I'm going to mention a wee bit more, again, it's part of the background that Edinburgh has in terms of surgery and great advances in medicine that took place. I'm going to mention a few more about that on today's tour. But there's a burial place here of James Syme. James Syme was one of the, he made great advances in surgery here in Scotland, and he was actually the surgeon ordinary, not the surgeon general, but the surgeon ordinary to the Queen. That would be Queen Victoria when she was here in Scotland. And this is so looking at the 1800s, so the 19th century, and that links in with Simpson, because he worked with Simpson. They both worked at the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, and Simpson discovered the discovery of chloroform and anaesthetics, and we're going to visit his statue as we walk along. But we thought we'd just start it here again, acknowledging Malvina Wells, who came from such a terrible background, but buried here with the great and the good here in Edinburgh. We're at St John's, the graveyard of St John's Episcopal Church. We always go on about the differences between the Episcopal Church and the Church of Scotland, so we won't really go into that too much depth.
And yeah, there's a little story, isn't there, Joe, because of the Leighton Library.
Oh yeah. Great. Mike coincidentally just bumped into one of the guys from the Leighton Library, and he pulled the car up, literally walking in the street, and he was so excited. He told us that they've just been awarded £30,000 from the Pilgrim Society, and he was jumped at the car. I stopped Mike in the street to actually tell him, so he was so excited. So we're going to take credit for some of that as well, because they're using our broadcast and just the stuff that we were doing to help the marketing as well. So a big thumbs up to one of our previous ones. If you haven't seen the film that we did off Leighton Library, it's all on there on YouTube, so you can go in there anytime. And I will mention we have a really good back catalogue there if you want to go look at some of the previous tours that we've done as well. So yeah, great news. So people that we're working with are giving us great feedback of how they're doing. So £30,000, that's going to be a great for their coffers to help
that's amazing.
do
Yeah.
some of the work they need done there. So we're coming on to the West End of Princes Street. It's going to be a wee bit busy here, so...
Just a little bit of promotion here, Joe, of the One World shop.
Yep.
Because I mentioned that last week, and I've been in there, and they've got some fabulous stuff there. It's really, as I said, ethical products. They're rewarding the manufacturers, and it's good quality. So if you're in Edinburgh around here, last minute Christmas gifts, the One World shop, great place to go.
And there's also a really nice cafe down here as well. It's called the Red, is it the Red Cockerel or the Cockerel Cafe? So there's a really nice cafe in here as well. Lots of little stuff here that Edinburgh's got little secret places. Also, there's an Undercroft in here, and they do live folk music as well. So I've seen some live shows down here as well. So we'll just carry on. This is also known as the Radical Church, Mike. I don't know if you know that.
No, I don't.
It's also because it's also got radical slogans and sayings here, and they do a lot for social justice and social change. So they're not scared to sort of like fly the flag for various causes. So it's known also as one of the radical churches.
Just behind you there, Joe, I was talking about this last week. I won't say too much about it, but Dean Ramsay, Edward Bannerman Ramsay, who was Dean Minister here at St John's. You know, the cabbies who used to drive the horse-drawn carriages in Edinburgh, they actually used to really fight in terms of who was going to give this man a fare, give him a ride. So it just shows you what a great sociable, friendly guy he was. He was much loved by the citizens of Edinburgh.
Or he was a good tipper.
As a good tipper, maybe. Us being Scots, but we won't go into that.
So this is the West End of Princes Street, and we've seen some change, even in our time, Mike, some changes we've seen on this street. Differences in how the retail's been affected by the changes that have taken place and how the shops have changed. So we're going to talk a wee bit about maybe even some of the locals will remember some of these buildings here, but we've got a few stories. And we're going to bring in something about social change, because go back to the 1970s when I first came up to Edinburgh to the university. We've seen some changes take place in that. There was for a long period I lived in London, and I was commuting up here on a monthly basis. And we're going to talk about some of the differences that we saw between Edinburgh and London in the 1970s and 80s as well. But we'll just walk along the street here because we've also got the West End, we've got the Santa Land going on, so we'll finish off in a little Christmas.
And you've got this this business with old police boxes being converted now into quick carry-away coffee places as well, which is...
See, these are quite nice. It's repurposing the old boxes. How are you doing? So this is all getting repurposed, and some of them are coffee shops and some of them are curry shops as well. Yeah. We'll come in and I'll have a wee chat with you. So what's your name? Daniel. So how long have you had this?
Oh, it's not mine. I just work out.
Yeah? I'm just going to take this off so I can get you there. Are you speaking to that?
Yeah, no worries.
So your name's Daniel? Daniel.
Yeah. The owner bought it just before the pandemic. He was using it. He runs a tour business out there.
Okay.
And then during the pandemic, when there was no tourism, he decided to turn it into a cafe when everything was open.
And how's business?
Good. Yeah, it's good because we are on Princes Street, so lots of walk-by traffic and stuff.
And with the Christmas fair going on?
Yeah, the Christmas fair's been really good.
Are you competing on prices with down in the gardens because it's really expensive?
Yeah, we're going a lot cheaper because we're obviously here all the time. It's a seasonal price.
The gardens are a wee bit expensive.
Yeah, pretty expensive. Yeah, but again, you're paying to be in the market. Yeah. So.
Well, nice to speak to you.
Nice to meet you too.
Cheers. So we mentioned the link between James Syme and James Simpson here. Simpson obviously discovered chloroform, and the discovery of chloroform, the link between Syme, they worked together at the Royal Infirmary, but Queen Victoria was the first monarch to give birth using anaesthesia through James Simpson here. So if there's any doctors or nurses, then this is a statue dedicated to James Simpson here. I'm reading a book at the moment I thought I'd mention. I think I've mentioned it before. It's about an Edinburgh author. Her name is E.S. Thompson. I think it's Elaine Thompson. and it's all based around Simpson's house and the discovery of chloroform. It's like a Victorian noir. So if you're looking for a book to read over the Christmas period, I would highly recommend it. And it's all about events that take place. It's a great sort of murder detective story. It's all about Victorian Edinburgh, and I really love that Gothic author. And Edinburgh's really famous for that as well.
I'm just going to swing a something quickly here, because you think of listed buildings that you can't do anything to because they're protected historically, like Edinburgh Castle. But if you look at this building above the Halifax here, you see this one with the windows, the very amazing wavy windows. Well, if we're going back to 1912, this used to be a cinema, and it was called Prince's Cinema, this being Prince's Street. The early days of silent movies, if you like. And it changed hands, and another company bought it over, and this company from Birmingham bought it over, and they were called the JC Cinema Company, and for many years, from the 1960s, this was called the JC. Now,
the racy JC.
The racy JC, as Joe was saying. I remember my parents taking me here, and it would be in the 1960s. And this glass window with the wavy frame used to be a smoking lounge as well as a cafe. And you would go here to watch cartoons. And this is what part of the repertoire was, cartoons. But the other part of the repertoire was what we will call continental movies.
Blue movies.
So blue movies, yeah. And sadly, it was taken over as that in 1964. It was known as the JC. For many years it was a cinema, but then it closed down, and as you can see, the Halifax now is taking over that accommodation.
Of course, the Halifax, for those people who are not from the UK, is a bank. It used to be a building society, but it's now a bank, so it's demutualised and become a bank.
So taking this little walk, which we haven't done before, along the west end of Princes Street. We haven't actually spoken very much about Princes Street some of the time, have we?
I know, and Princes Street is one of these great thoroughfares in Europe, because on one side you've got the shops, on the other side you've got this unrestricted view of Edinburgh Castle. So Princes Street, it used to be the main shopping drag. I think George Street has taken over from that, and certainly St Andrew Square. So things have moved. It's still quite a few shops, it's all shops on Princes Street. I would really love it to see it all done with lovely cafes and maybe nice restaurants and things along here, because if you can get into one of these places, either for the festival fireworks or for the New Year fireworks, these are the places to get, so you can get into these places.
So going along another one here to another building that may be very familiar to a lot of people from Edinburgh. Maybe more today because of Waterson's bookstore, but if you look above it, you will see it's a very, very elegant building, and this is also a listed building. They can't do too much to change it, because as you can see, the architecture here, and it dates back to 1866. Right, now it was the university club. It was built to be back then, and you can see the elegant Corinthian columns that I've been talking about before, taken from the orders of architecture, and this is based very much on an Italian palace. It's beautiful architecture, and it was many different things. It actually spent a little time in the 1970s as what was called Fire Island Club, and I'm going to get Joe to tell you a little bit about that, because I was never in there before it became Waterston's. So Joe's going to tell you a little bit about Fire Island. Here we go. Right.
Well, Fire Island was one of the most famous gay clubs in, certainly in the north, certainly in Scotland, but it was renowned, and it used to get the big attractions. All the big groups used to play there, and I remember going here to see Blondie, and I mean, it was so close, it was so intimate. You were there with Debbie Harry. I mean, she was so close, but all the others, but people used to come from all around, all from the north of England, used to come here to Fire Island. It was one of the best nightclubs right on Princess Street. Hi guys. One of the best nightclubs. They went on for years. And we're going to talk a wee bit more about the social changes of that, because that's one of the social changes we're going to talk about, Mike. Because as I mentioned, I lived in London for a while, but I used to commute back up to Edinburgh because I was responsible for I worked in the financial services, so I was responsible for a lot of the financial companies up here for the company that I work with. And in the 1980s, when the AIDS crisis hit the UK, I was coming up here and seeing a completely different thing from what was happening down south, because down south they were introducing all this anti-gay legislation. So there was Section 28 or Clause 28, where it was forbidden for any public utility or any public building to be used for gay people to meet in public. And so we're bringing out this thing, and it was down there, it was all, they were calling it the gay plague, whereas up here, AIDS was a very different story. Because up here, most of the AIDS, the people who've been infected with AIDS were junkies, heroin users, because Edinburgh had a very, very bad heroin situation, or a very bad heroin problem, but also the prostitutes in Edinburgh as well. So while they were down south, they were doing all this thing about it's a gay plague. In Edinburgh, the city fathers or the city council were saying, no, it's not. And of course, at that time, you mentioned before, I wasn't going to mention Margaret Thatcher, but you can't let her off that lightly, Mike. We've got to mention Margaret Thatcher. Just got to mention her somewhere in social history. So the Thatcher government was very, very centralised and tightly controlled the budgets of all the local authorities throughout Great Britain. It was tight and tight and tight. And of course, Scotland in general did not support the Thatcher government. And that was exemplified by the Thatcher government introducing this new poll tax in Scotland 1 year before they introduced it. So they were using Scotland as the guinea pig. And we'll talk about that a wee bit later on as well. But down there, it was all fear and doom and gloom. And they were restricting money to go to the city councils. And Edinburgh's one of those city councils that was being affected by this. Because Edinburgh realised that its AIDS crisis was actually throughout the general population and not just restricted to a minority group. And they went against the government, and they were introducing needle exchanges. All the buses were being decorated by red ribbons and big slogans all over the city saying AIDS concerns us all. They had a big slogan beamed up on the castle rock saying AIDS concerns us all. And the Thatcher government hit Edinburgh really hard in terms of the money, and they cut the funding of Edinburgh for the whole city, because Edinburgh decided to stand up against the propaganda that the Thatcher government were giving out. And Edinburgh, and also when I was commuting up and down, seeing all the buses, red ribbons tied around them saying, this is concerns us all, don't listen to the central government because it's a bigger issue than you think it is. And down there they were trying to restrict it and introducing restrictive laws. And it just seemed bizarre. It was and that's when I realised that there was a great cultural difference between Scotland and certainly London at the time, the London Parliament. And of course in London down at the time as well, we had the lesbian groups were invading Parliament and abseiling over the Parliament, and they were also invading the BBC studios during a live news broadcast. So militancy grew under the Thatcher, and I guess it was these what they call it, unexpected consequences, that because they introduced these draconian laws or these draconian regulations, that people became so radicalised, and people were coming out all over the place. And so this is one of my big coming outs here, was at the Fire Island.
I'm just thinking about the big names who have played here, including the 3 Degrees.
The 3 Degrees, yeah.
And the Village People.
Village People, yeah.
And also Eartha Kitt.
I saw Eartha Kitt. I saw Eartha Kitt here, and I saw Eartha Kitt in London as well. I saw Blondie in here. I didn't see Elton John. I think Elton John also played in here as well. But the big names were in here. It was part of the big circuit names for the groups in the 70s and the 80s. Eartha Kitt was wonderful. Dear Eartha.
And it's still a stunning building to go into if you like books, as I do.
Yeah.
And you can really enjoy the magnificent staircase at the back that takes you up to the other levels, as well as this big bay window. You can see people sitting in there, and I think it's now a coffee area. where you can sit and have coffee and nice views over Princess Street and over to the castle, of course. And now we're seeing also more outlets, like food outlets even, which is a rare thing in Princess Street. Because there's this other one over here now, there's a new one called Bar and Block on the other side. So I remember as a child, it was one of the great things to go with my parents to tea rooms, like Cropper's Tea Room, and sit and be served with the nice white tablecloths, and you would get the waitresses with their black uniforms,
white pennies, white aprons, and the little hats on,
and look at these magnificent views of the castle. So maybe there's something of that coming back a little bit of not the white aprons, but maybe the
certainly I think it should be more eateries, because in summertime this could be a great boulevard with all open up with their unrestricted views of the castle. I have to think of other great boulevards in other cities, and also we've got the Johnny Walker building is open up as well. I think that's going to change a few things too.
Yeah, we spoke about that last week with the clock. That clock.
The clock is great. They've got that going as well.
So we're going to walk further along, and there's another building which has got a bit of history further along here.
So I wanted to continue about the social history, because I mentioned that they introduced Thatcher government introduced this poll tax. It was actually the poll tax that was caused her downfall in the end. And as I mentioned, it was started here in Scotland 1 year before they introduced it into England, because she had no votes to lose in Scotland. And I remember I was living in London at the time, so I could see this difference. There was nobody voting for the Conservative Party, for the Thatcher Party in that period. So she had nothing to lose. And so she used Scotland basically as a guinea pig when they introduced this new law. And I talked about people become radical. Well, this was seen all over, because what happened was that anyone over the age of 16, you had to pay tax. If they were registered to vote, you had to pay tax, and so that's what was called the poll tax. So you'd have families, working class families, who could have maybe 5 or 6 people in the family over 16, but they would be earning pennies, they'd be low minimum wage, and they were expected to pay tax practically for every room in the house, for every adult that was of working age in the house. And then they had someone of the Duke of Buccleuch sitting in a 130 bedroomed mansion paying one poll tax for the one person. You just want to come over here a bit?
Yeah, we're getting in the way a wee bit. So I'll just move over.
So there was this inequality that was seen in Scotland first, and of course the Scots didn't take it easily. So there were various campaigns that were started. One of them was called Can Pay But Won't Pay. So people withheld their tax. But you can carry on. You can talk about one of these buildings here, or?
Yeah. Yep. Just looking at the transformations, you can see these windows as well.
And hotels are moving back into the city centre again.
So this is like Starbucks now up the stairs, but again, these would be tea rooms where people used to go for their afternoon tea and cakes, with the cake stand with all the different little goodies on it,
Come in a trolley.
Yeah.
Is it on the trolley?
On the trolley.
It's on trolley. So, as I mentioned, these campaigns, there was the can pay but won't pay, so people withheld their tax, and there was a can't pay and won't pay. Now in Scotland, if you could not pay your tax, what they would do is they would send the bailiffs around. They would have what was known as a poinding, it's a very old name, where they would come and take your property, and I mean televisions, fridges, washing machines, couches. They would take it from your house up to the value of your debt. So people got quite creative, and this is where my mother got involved in this to some extent. If you formed a limited company in your street, for example, so you form a limited company, you would then sell all of your goods to this limited company, but you would be a director of this limited company, but you didn't own anything. You rented back your furniture. So you would be renting back for the smallest coin in the realm. So say a penny, all right, but then it was a half penny, but a penny. So you would rent from your limited company all of your furniture, so you didn't own anything. And so when the bailiffs came to try and take the furniture, you could legitimately, so you were using capitalism to fight against the Conservative government, because you didn't own anything. You rented down to your last teaspoon, you rented from the limited company that your street had established. So people became very creative, so they couldn't take your goods. And so it became one of these great campaigns that started here in Scotland. And you go, okay. And it became so successful. And it became so successful that it actually made a mockery of the whole of the poll tax. And so when they did introduce it into England, it was already failed up here. So when it introduced it to England, what happened in England? They had major riots in Trafalgar Square. And this is when they knew that the death knell was sounding for Margaret Thatcher. And of course the Conservatives, as we're seeing now, the sharks circulate. And we're seeing that live in London right now. We're seeing that live in London almost now, where we know that Boris is wounded, and the sharks are circulating around Boris, because they're going to have a vote tomorrow and they ain't happy. And I think we're going to, so it's almost like history repeating itself.
Oh, I know, as always.
So there's a little bit of social change and social ingenuity that people, when they're really hard pressed, can be creative and opposing legislation that affects them in a negative way. So thumbs up to the Scots who all started that, and thumbs up to the grassroots people who started the can't pay, won't pay, because that led to the downfall.
We're getting a lot of thumbs up here as well, Joe. Okay. So I'm going to talk about another building. I'm going to move further along.
Yeah, move along a wee bit.
Here.
I'll go on this side
There's
of the
a major entrance to Princess Street Gardens, so I'm just going to move along a little bit. I'd like to talk about this building here. This one, oops, sorry, this here, which used to be Debenhams. You can see this building. It's very elegant, and again, it's a listed building. It's vacant at the moment, I think, which is quite sad, because Debenhams was a very loved company, and for years and years they had a shop here. Now, this building was not built for a departmental store. It was built for the Conservative Club.
There's a link.
If you're familiar with Boris Johnson. Well, he happens to be a Conservative Prime Minister, if you're not from the UK, just to interpret that a little bit. So this building inside had a most elegant, huge staircase, like Hollywood, you know, like very, very dramatic staircase. And when they were repurposing it, which they had to do when it was changing use from being a Conservative club to being a department store, they moved the staircase right to the back of the store. And it was also the first departmental store that had a circular glass enclosed lift. And you know what I'm going to think about then? The 1970s, I'm thinking about Towering Inferno, which is terrible. And it just actually springs to mind that glass enclosed lift that would not have been seen in Scotland until that movie, and then this had one inside it. So it was designed by Robert Rowand Anderson, who of course designed the cross back there to Dean Ramsay that we spoke about, and also designed many other significant buildings, including Edinburgh Medical School. So it's in a Italianate sort of style, and it was built in 1882 to 84. See there? And it's the original facade. But you know what they did? They took, in some of these buildings, they actually removed the interiors. Not so much this one, but they did with the other one.
Yeah.
And kept the facades of the buildings because they were so elegant.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my little architecture too.
Yeah,
We'll
a
get
little
back
tour
to
of
social
architecture.
history, and I think we're going to
find a way into the gardens.
Into the gardens, yeah.
Um,
Okay.
And sometimes when you look at Princess Street, you think, oh, it's really sad because all of the buildings used to be really, really elegant. But now, when you do look at it in many regards, there are some real 60s brutalism as well that's going on here.
Well, as a footnote there, if you look at this glass building, you can see there, just opposite here, the glass one.
Wedged in between them.
Beside Debenhams here. Well, that was a connector building, and guess what was next door to that? It was the Liberal Club. So you had the Conservative Club sitting next door to the Liberal Club with a connecting glass brutalist architecture, as we call it there.
Yeah.
Even in its own time, that's what it would have been called in the 1960s. I think maybe some folk want to know about why it's called Princess Street, Joe.
Well, it's named after the Hanoverian princes when they built the new town. So we're going back to the late 1700s. So it's not princess, it's not the feminine, it's princes plural. So when they built the new town, the plans all came together in the late 1700s by a young man known as James Craig, who designed the plans for the new town. It was George III who was on the throne, and of course Hanoverians. And so the new town was named after, so we've got George Street, named after George III. We've got Charlotte Square, who was named after his wife. We've got the princes, because they were the princes of the George III, so it's named after the princes of George III. We also have the Union, so we've got Thistle Street and we've got Rose Street, so Rose being the emblem of England, Thistle being the emblem of Scotland. And so the whole new town was planned and named around the Hanoverian king, George III.
I think we've got a comment here, a good comment from Marjorie. Thanks for the comment. She's saying she believes back in the 18th, 19th century, Princess Street was largely residential, and it was, wasn't it?
Oh,
yeah,
is indeed.
Yeah.
And part of the problem with the new town was there was no place to shop. So people still had to go back into the old town to do their shopping, or send their maids or their staff. And also there was no places to meet. This is the other problem, the drawback, because people didn't move en masse. They had to encourage people, like you do with any new builds. You had to encourage people over. And so they would build these meeting places, the assembly rooms. The assembly rooms.
Yeah.
So they built the assembly rooms,
Yeah.
and a lot of cities do have these what are known as assembly rooms, and Bath has a similar thing, and they were built so that the young gentlemen and young ladies could go and meet from the from respectable families could go and meet on a regular basis at the balls.
And there is a Castle of Light event which is happening up here in the evenings, and I'm going along to that this Sunday coming, so looking forward to that. They used to say, Joe, that when you've got these little bits of random shaped slab, that it was for the poor people, and it was the offcuts of the nice regular cut sets in the new town. I don't know if that is exactly the case.
Well, I always heard it was for the horses.
But the horses as well, yeah.
Yeah, and the poor people would wear little things like clogs, give them a bit more of a grip. So here we've got the Ross Bandstand.
Just want to get a picture there of the tree. We can actually see the Christmas tree, I think, just.
So the Christmas tree is a gift from the people of Norway. We're going to mention them later on as well.
I'm going to do this
Yeah,
again.
you
This
point
is my
to it,
favourite way of actually showing, if I can do this. There it is. It's Edinburgh's Christmas tree.
So the people of Norway gift Britain. So they gift. There's a tree they put in Trafalgar Square, and there's a tree they put up here on the mound, and it's a gift that the people of Norway give to us every year since the end of the war.
Yeah, Hordaland or something, I think is the name of the place, the part of Norway. And
And this is the Ross Bandstand. So in New Year, this is where all the festivities take place. It used to be in the old town, but they moved it here in the 1990s, I believe it was. And this whole park will be full of revellers on New Year's Eve. but so is Princess Street itself. So there's no traffic on Princess Street. So you can get up to about, it used to be up to about 250,000 people would be on the streets here, maybe up to 300,000. Sometimes it did get very dangerous at one point. So they've actually introduced ticketing now. So you have to have a ticket to go to the New Year festival here. So there's different grades. You have a general ticket to go onto the street. But they have speakers all down the street as well. They have big screens. And then down here you've got your live concert. I've seen people like the Scissor Sisters and various other groups playing live down here. And you can have a blizzard blowing about you. It's absolutely amazing atmosphere. And the whole city's just alive because New Year is our big festival. I know Christmas is big, but New Year just, I mean, the Scottish people think they invented New Year.
So Philip has just posted a comment to say he's going to be here and you are going to be with him.
Indeed, I've got tickets for Philip as well, so
Yeah.
I've got other plans. I'm actually going to get tickets for the Panto. That's another great British thing. We love the Panto, so we're going to get tickets for the Panto.
Well, you know what? My son's got the Panto, which he always does, and but this year I booked tickets for the Dundee Rep. The Dundee Rep Company, they've got a beautiful theatre up in Dundee, and they're doing a Christmas carol.
Yeah.
And it's always a regular tradition with my son and I that we always do that one as well. But
Yeah.
he does the extra one at the King's Theatre in
I like the King's
Yeah,
Theatre
yeah.
because there's something special about the Scottish pantos because it's very local. They used to do when I was working when I came back up to Edinburgh, I came back with the company to open up the offices for the company I was working with. I came up here, and they used to do an adult night, only adults, and they had a completely different script, and they made it completely blue. And I can guarantee that there was nobody in the audience sober, and I don't think any of the actors were sober either. But it used to be a big office party night, and it was hilarious. They don't do it anymore, it's a
No,
shame.
they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've pointed out this monument here before, but I think it's worth pointing it again, Mike.
Oh yeah.
This is one of the great monuments here. This is dedicated to the men and women of the United States who enrolled in the First World War to come and help fight for Scotland and Britain during the First War. So it's just like it's called here the Call.
And I believe the guy was Tate Mackenzie, I think was his the sculptor's name. I'll just double check that, but I just think that's what he was. And we've got a bit of a it's maybe a wee bit difficult to read that.
Yeah, it'd be very difficult to read that with a light on it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great monument, and I think it's again it just shows the link between Scotland and specifically this is for the United States. But it says America. I mean, it might do for Canada as well.
Yeah, he had connections with Canada, I think, Joe,
Yeah.
and he was all about rehabilitation of soldiers who'd suffered physical as well as mental injuries, and he designed some kind of facial image to kind of cover up certain battle-scarred features in people's faces, and he was very much into physical well-being as well. So you can see, I think, in the statue that there's a lot of good understanding of the anatomy of the figure, the way it sits.
I think it's a beautiful statue.
The details of certain parts of it, I think, are great, and
It's a great sculpture.
it is a great piece of work.
Yeah. And also the background of it as well. You can see the call to arms here from people from various backgrounds. Here, different people from complete different backgrounds being called to arms, and then coming from the North America in their kilts, and then going off to battle.
Yeah.
I think it's a very evocative thing. I really like this statue. And I do bring, when I've got American people, anybody from North America, I do bring them down here because, again, it's showing the links that we have with Scotland.
Mind your step, Joe.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that sculptor wanted to have his heart buried in front of the monument because he was so proud of it, but the council wouldn't let it happen because it wasn't consecrated ground, and it was buried in a very understated grave in the St John's Episcopal Church.
Again, The castle, they light up for different events. So on St Andrew's Day, it was all washed in blue. So they lit it up blue. On St Patrick's Day, it's all green.
Yeah.
On Breast Cancer Awareness Week, it's all pink. On St David's Day for Wales, it's green and red.
Yeah.
And then St George's Day for England, it's all red. So it's great that they actually do it, you know, because you do, when you walk along, it kind of jogs your memory a bit. And then a World AIDS Day, they put put red ribbons, they project red ribbons onto the rock as well, but it all goes red as well.
Oh, that's great.
Coming up here to one of my wee favourite characters here, this is Wojtek, Wojtek the bear. The gardens are used to commemorate people who came and fought for specifically our freedom here, but they fought for their own freedom. And one of the armies that came over here were the Polish armies. So during the Second World War, a lot of the Poles, because of the invasion of Adolf Hitler and the invasion of Stalin, came across here. And they had the Polish regiments. So this is why one of the reasons that Scotland's got a very large Polish population, because a lot of them came over from a lot of them came over in the First World War and didn't go back, because if they would go back, a lot of them were killed when they went back. The stories of the bear. This is Wojtek, who was adopted by the Polish regiment. I think it was in Iraq and Iran, in that area, as a baby. He was found. He was adopted. And he was taken to the front line, and used to carry ammunition cases for the regiment. And then, obviously, when the war was finished, the regiment came back here, and Wojtek came back. I didn't know what to do with him, and so he actually ended up in Edinburgh Zoo, but he was treated like a king in the zoo as well. And when he died, he was given a great funeral. And so he plays a big part, not only for the Polish people who live in Scotland, but for the people in Edinburgh. Wojtek was very well known, and he's got his own statue.
I believe he used to drink beer, Joe, as well.
He did drink beer. He used to stand at the bar. He used to come into the pubs. He used to stand up and drink beer in the pubs. He used to go around. He was very well known.
Yeah.
But
There's another these great monuments
Yeah.
that you just come across, isn't it?
I know.
I
People
think
do wonder.
I think people have been, you know, the same old Edinburgh tradition of giving that nose a rub.
Oh yeah,
think,
I know.
for good
But you
luck.
can't.
Yeah.
Well, this one you can't stop, because
Yeah.
it is Wojtek.
Yeah.
He's a lovely
Yeah.
little bear.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. You go ahead. But this again, this is for the Polish people who came to, who fought for their own liberation in many regards, but were based here in Scotland. Scotland was a base of quite a lot of international regiments during the Second World War. So this is a wee Wojtek. Yes, it's a wee kid touching his nose as well. Yeah,
Wee cutie. Yeah.
it's cute. And you can see all the sparkle of the. So the gardens are used. This is for this part. We're in the West Gardens, and the West Gardens are used for the little kids. So this is their little Santa land for the babies. The West Gardens are used more for the adults and for those reckless teenagers.
Yes, that's right.
And on the East Gardens, they've got the Christmas market and the big fun fair for the adults. Come between Christmas and New Year. They'll start building on all this, because the fun fair, everything gets bigger between Christmas and New Year. New things get added. I went to the ice rink the other day to watch. I didn't go skating. So they've got the ice rink in George Street, so that's all going. So
It's a bit more confined, I think, than it was before, though. You know,
Yeah.
they're being careful, I think.
I did like it when it was in St Andrew Square. I thought it was nice, because they had nice cafes outside it as well. We mentioned about the Polish regiments that came over, but also the Norwegians. When Norway was invaded, a lot of the Norwegian Air Force flew the planes that they had, or they flew over to Scotland with their planes, and the regiments came over here. In fact, even during the war, they used to have the boats that went from Shetland to Norway, and it used to be called the Shetland Bus, and it'd be taking stuff over for the Norwegian undergrounds and Norwegian freedom fighters, supplies, and so there's a great big Norwegian regiments of people who came over here as well, who managed to escape and not scuttle their ships or their planes. And we mentioned that the Norwegian people donate us every year our Christmas tree. But there was also a rock here that a lot of people walk past. And this rock was put here to commemorate the contribution of the Norwegians. And it's them thanking us. It's as well as them helping us fight in the Second World War. This is them thanking us, and it says here, and I'll just read it for you. It says, during the war years 40 to 45, the Norwegian Brigade and other army units were raised and trained in Scotland. Here we found hospitality, friendship and hope during the dark years of exile. In grateful memory of our friends and allies on these isles, this stone was erected in the year 1978. So this is another thank you from the people of Norway to the people of Scotland and Great Britain for helping them during the Second World War. So you can walk through these gardens, and there are monuments to various things, and it's almost like it's a social history as you walk through the gardens as well. But we're going to finish off with something Christmassy, a little Christmas card.
I think so. We're going into.
And look at the sky now. You get this beautiful pink in the sky. You get a beautiful sunset.
Yeah, we've got the natural thing happening in the sky as well as the Castle of Light coming up.
Yeah. So
too.
this is the little maze that the kiddies go into. So it's a Christmas tree maze, and there's a Santa's Grotto. A little fun fair going on for the little ones.
Yeah, just give you a little flavour of this.
Up to the fountain.
And the fountain's working, and it didn't for many years, but they got the recent restoration, and they got it painted, and it's looking
so
very
restored,
fine.
it's looking glorious.
Yeah.
And it's great in summertime when all the kids go in wading in it and paddling, and it's nice.